Good morning. I'm Terry Finney. I'm a psychologist and an executive coach, and I'm also the mental health lead for Energize Colorado's mental health team. Let me tell you a little bit about Energize Colorado. Basically, we are Coloradans set up to help Coloradans, and particularly, we are interested in helping business people survive and thrive through this really difficult time period. So what we've done is put together a whole bunch of resources, not just mental health, but a bunch of resources to help business people. And so we would love people to check out energizecolorado.com, see what we have. So a little bit about the Mental Health Wellness Initiative. We all know there's a financial crisis, and really all signs are pointing to the fact that there's also a mental health crisis and a health crisis. So what we've done is put together a bunch of mental health resources to support Coloradans through this emotionally difficult time. So on our site, we have everything from free yoga and exercise classes to some free, great mindfulness apps, some meditations, and just some information on how to deal with stress. So today what we're going to talk about is, the topic is A Working Mom Stays Home, and we have two fabulous speakers. We're really grateful to have them. So let me introduce Dr. Nancy Richmond is an emeritus professor in the Department of Sociology and Criminology at DU. Some of her research has focused on barriers to inequity for women for their advancement. She's serving as the Director of Research at Colorado Women's College. She's a mayoral appointee to the Denver Women's Commission. She received her PhD in Urban Studies and a master's degree in Public Administration. Wow, Nancy, you've been super busy. You have a lot to do. And Sarah Blanchard is a writer, speaker, and coach. She wrote the book Flex Mom. She's done a TED Talk on that book, and she speaks to issues of how women individually can maintain their mental health while they are working at home. Sarah's talk, she's worked for Goldman Sachs a while ago in her previous life and has taught positive psychology at Harvard. Sarah's going to talk to us more about some of the individual issues that women are going through and some kind of thoughts about coping and what we can do to stay mentally healthy. So thank you both. Nancy, I wanted to start off with you. And I read in your paper, I was really struck by the fact that there are around 57% of women who have been negatively impacted by this, and the number of men who've been negatively impacted is about half of that. So I'm curious what your thoughts are, kind of the big picture about what contributes to that.
Great, thanks, and I'm really happy to be here with you today. Thanks so much for inviting me. Well, and let's remember that when we talked those numbers, 57%, this was looking at mental health issues. And one of the things that that the Kaiser Family Foundation was looking at was, how are men and women faring differently? And in fact, for a while, it seemed like things were more or less the same, but over time, women were becoming more and more impacted by in terms of mental health issues by the pandemic. And it's not that men were not being impacted, but they were kind of there at a steady state. The problem was getting worse for women. So I want to step back and talk about two trends that are important to understanding the mental health of women during this pandemic. The first is that women are overrepresented in jobs that we now see as essential, and these are low-wage workers too. So two things are happening there. One is that they're on the front lines of the pandemic, and so they're worrying about bringing home disease to their families in substantial ways. So it's a big deal. And also there are jobs that are not being paid very well. And so that even if women are at this point, 30% or 40% of women are the breadwinner or the co-breadwinner of their families, being in these low-wage jobs is having an impact on their families when their other breadwinner might be out of work. Okay, so all of these, the issues of work and pay are profoundly influencing women. That's one thing. And the second is that the topic of today, that more women are working remotely at the same time that their schools and daycares are closed, and all of a sudden women are doing lots and lots of different things. And so in the work that I do, I think about those broad trends, and then I ask, what do we know about these contexts that are going to make a difference for the future? So some of the things we know about women and particularly the work-family dynamic for women. First of all, that women are more likely to adjust their time at work when they have children. We have a long storied history of this trend. Okay, so it's likely that this is also happening in the context of women working at home. Women also shoulder the burden of unpaid labor at significantly greater rates than men. And I want to say, when I talk about unpaid labor in the home, there are 3 different components to that labor. The first is the physical labor, the actual things about household chores. And that's what we hear about the most, that women do more of the laundry, that women do more of the cooking, women do more of the cleaning. They also do more of the homeschooling. So they're actually physically doing more in their home while they're working while they're working at home, this is even greater. But there's another component, it's called emotional labor, and women do more of that as well. And that is about the kind of taking care of, the caregiving, not just in the physical sense, but in the emotional sense. And the third kind of labor that women are involved in is something called cognitive labor. In that case, that's about managing a household. It's a talk about identifying the needs of the household, thinking about the options, making decisions, monitoring progress. Women, that's cognitive labor. And it turns out that women do a whole lot more of that than men have historically and are doing it now during that pandemic. So those kinds of things are clearly happening. Then the third thing I want to talk about before I turn it over to other people is the idea of motherhood penalties. This has been a real factor in the workplaces for now decades. And it means that the research shows us that women are paid less when they have children. And how much less? Well, it varies by the number of children, but the estimates range from 8 to 18% less than men. So that they're suffering in terms of wages, they're suffering in terms of advancement. These are trends that have been happening prior to the pandemic, but working at home really amplifies those inequities and exacerbates them. And maybe I'll stop there and let Sarah jump in because she can tell us why.
I love what you just said about those 3 different areas, because that is such a good framework to have in our brains when we're thinking about this like overwhelmed feeling that moms have, where you're just like, I feel like I'm doing so much more. And yet, are we really? Like, it's great to see that there are studies backing some of this up, but to break it down into those 3 areas helps you sort of process, well, what areas can I ask for help? Because I think one of the things that it's important to do, first of all, and Terry, we were talking about this in the prep call, but like, things have changed. Things have totally changed since before COVID shut down the infrastructure that we have for support, and this pressure and fear of death and illness and safety. And one of the best pieces of advice I was given by a psychiatrist we interviewed was that it's okay to mourn the loss of our previous life. Mm-hmm. And until we really just sort of go, this is really not fun, and sort of accept that what happened before is probably never going to come fully back, or at least it'll be a long time until it comes back. So you sort of mourn that, grieve that, let it go. It's going to be hard to regroup and figure out how we're going to shuffle around the responsibilities in those 3 areas of unpaid labor that you talked about. Mm-hmm. Because I agree, when I hear moms talking about it, it's the emotional and cognitive labor that you talked about, this idea of caregiving, like my kid was feeling anxious, so I had to stop and comfort them. Right. Or this idea of managing the household, now that the pools are closed, I've got to be on my computer at this exact time in order to plan for their activities in 2 weeks' time when that slot opens at the museum or whatever. These things are the things that are on mom's brains, but often are harder to pass off to the partner. Whereas chores are very visible, very physical, and also kind of more masculine things that we could probably, it depends on what structure your household is for sure, but we could often pass those physical, visible chores off to people more easily, because it's hard to say when you're in the middle of a thing, hey, can you pay attention to that crying kid? We're going to be more likely to want to do it. So I don't know. I loved that structure that you laid out.
So I just want to add one thing here and say that let's not forget that lots of women don't have that other person to also pass things off to. So I think it's knowing that we do all this work and thinking harder about how we allocated? And are there other things, if you don't have a partner in the household, how do you get help on all of these other dimensions? And I think that's really important to use it. Is it your external, is it your extended family? Is it your neighbor? Do we have to think differently about asking for support from our community than we've done before? Because we tend to think what's in the home stays in the home. But I think that we need to just bust through that barrier and say that this is all, we are all living in community. We happen to be in a household structure, but there's a larger community that's around us.
Absolutely. One of my favorite exercises that I do is to have people put together a good people list. Who are the good people in your life? And they can play like different roles. They can be your confidants, but they can also be the people in your village who, if all of you go down, I don't want to say go down with the flu right now, because that's a whole different meaning of getting sick right now. But like when you need support, who are the people who might drop off some food at your doorstep that you can ask when you're about to like lose it and you need someone to watch your children? And in COVID, I think especially having an extra list of who are the people that you could include in that bubble that you trust to have the same barriers of, are they wearing a mask like you are? Are they, whatever your comfort level is, that you have a matching group that you feel comfortable having exposure to and really get that human interaction in these times is pretty critical. So I do love having a good people list, because sometimes when you're in the middle of it and you're going through a mental health crisis or you're really struggling, your instinct is and you both would know better than I do, but my sense, and also from personal experience, is that you kind of want to hide. You don't want to reach out when you're feeling yucky. But that's exactly what we need to do when we're starting to feel like overburdened.
Something that I noticed, and actually on a personal level, is that a lot of people who are fairly resilient, you're going through life and you really don't realize that you feel a little depressed, because it's just kind of lingering and you're functioning fine, but there's just a little bit of a sadness. And we women really count on other women, more so than men count on men. And I think, and I know that we're not getting this as much as we used to. And I think that this is a big loss. And I think it affects, I know for me, it affects my, my joy, my health, my well-being. So there's that too.
It's so fascinating that at a time when we are asked to be socially distant and we have to quarantine and socially isolate, we actually need community and so much more. And it's not just because we're self-isolating, it's because all of these uncertainties are in our lives and we're just needing support to manage them. It's more than one person can do on their own.
So let me, the three of us talked at different times about role, purpose, and identity, and kind of how that's shifting and some of the loss related to that, and how important that is. Do you want to speak to that?
I think purpose is incredibly important, if that's okay if I jump in. I think it's one of the most important things that keeps us going, aside from relationships, as you mentioned. And I think we could have a whole other conversation or dive further into that as well. But in terms of purpose, I think especially as you go, and so coming from, I've been a stay-at-home mom in the past, and that shift of giving up your outside identity to taking care of your children, for some people, and bless these people, it's amazing. They love it. They love taking care of their children, and that's their purpose. When I was used to having a professional background and then came to having my focus be within the walls of my home to raise my children, I had a really hard time accepting that that was now my purpose. Like when you're exhausted, when you're emotionally stretched thin, and you're sweeping the crumbs off your kitchen floor for the 18th time that day, it doesn't feel like you're contributing to the greater good. So for people who've lost their jobs during COVID, for people who are suddenly shifting to have to do this, it's easy to see kids as like the thing that's taking me away from my ability to contribute to that greater purpose. And it's easy to fall into resentment for those day-to-day things. And so I find it helpful if we can almost find purpose and be like, okay, like I have a new purpose. I either need to add creating a nurturing home, and in that you do sweep up the crumbs so that you don't have ants crawling on the floor. Like if you can switch those, catch yourself in those little mini like moments where you're getting that resentment or anger, and you just remind yourself that it fits into whatever purpose it is you've defined that to be, this added pressure of being with kids underfoot. I think that makes a huge difference in our ability to sort of stay afloat mentally.
I'm worried
I,
about ants.
sorry, I agree. And I just want to add another layer onto that, because I think thinking about work as purposeful, there's a larger culture that helps define that. It can't all be internal, that it can't all be your individual sense of purpose. And I keep thinking about, when we talk about essential workers, it turns out that childcare workers are not essential workers, right? The childcares have closed. And so if there's a way for us culturally to rethink what that is, that childcare is, or care in general, because it's not just childcare, it's elder care, it's care for people who are ill. All of that is essential work, and we ought to be valuing it as essential, but we don't. And so I think that leads to some of this problem when you do have that sense of, what am I contributing to society? It doesn't feel like much because we aren't really valuing that externally. And so I think that's a really important component.
Yeah, and feeling like you're contributing is a huge kind of protective factor around depression.
Yeah. And it can't just come from you. I want to speak about another kind of identity, or a twist on identity, that's happening during this COVID moment when we're all on Zoom and we are doing our work on Zoom. And suddenly you are a mom whose child, and also a working mom, and you typically go to the office and you separate your home from your work. With Zoom, it's really hard to do that. That is, your home is there, which means your children are there, and they're popping in and out of your Zoom meeting, and they're, or you've got dogs who are, like I do right now, are pawing at the chair, wanting to be part of the conversation. So suddenly your work and home are collapsed. And for women, I think this has become increasingly challenging, because women before the pandemic have historically been challenged by stereotypes that they are not as committed to their work. And so now we see women trying to work at home with their kids all around them. It does pop up, those old stereotypes. And I know I've been talking to lots of working moms who are just worried sick that the fact that their children are popping in and out of their Zoom rooms means that they're not being taken seriously by their coworkers, and that it's going to have implications for them long term. So again, another stressor around identity, when all of a sudden identities, which never were separated, but at least they had the appearance of separation, are now conflated.
And that's different than how men, I read that piece that you wrote, but like, that's different than how men believe that they're being perceived. Like, it's almost like, wow, you're a hero. You are looking after your children while you're on your Zoom call. I mean, this is very broadly speaking, obviously, but it's that difference that you're talking about in perception. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And we don't know yet. I mean, we haven't done the research to know how much that is happening. I do know, though, this is anecdotally from talking to many of my working moms, it worries them because they know what things were like before, and they're thinking, and unless we've made some really profound cultural shift as we've moved into the Zoom world, those stereotypes still exist.
So we have talked, the three of us right now, about the importance of relationships and a little bit about making sure that those are present. But in terms of self-care, so we've talked a little bit about, the three of us, about taking care of your body, taking care of your mind, and taking care of your relationships. And I know you both have some advice and some tools for that. We'd love to hear what you know.
I'm turning it to Sarah.
Positive psych, one of the things I love about it is that it's research based on what helps people thrive. And it's for the majority of people who are doing okay. And so we can take bits of that to build up our own resilience. And everybody knows sort of basic fundamentals about what it means to take care of our bodies, but I don't think it hurts to really emphasize that getting enough sleep, that exercise, our bodies are made to exercise. So if we're not even getting up and walking to the water cooler anymore, and you're sitting in front of a Zoom call, I almost want people to take this as permission to prioritize exercising, whatever that means to you every day, because it helps our mental health. Hugs, I'm sure we're all getting hugs aplenty if you're working from home with children, but that physical touch is so critical. Eating well as opposed to eating Doritos out of a box or out of a bag at your desk between meetings, making those fundamentals really help us at least reach our baseline biologically programmed levels of happiness. So it's not possible for everybody in every working situation to get all of those things. I want to acknowledge that, but I do want to say that if we can work towards prioritizing them and not seeing them as an option or something that I'll do after I meet everybody else's needs, we'll be able to better serve other people's needs in our homes if we're able to take care of those things.
I'm not the best at self-care, so I'm not sure I'm the person to give people advice on this particular topic. But one of the things I've been thinking a lot about, which is a different kind of self-care maybe, is thinking about our Zoom meetings. At least my impression is that people just popped into Zoom meetings as if they were the same, and everybody treats the meeting as if it was the same kind of meeting as it was before. And I'm wondering if we can't use the Zoom technology to actually make meetings work better, like giving people permission to turn off their screens in the middle of the meeting, because everybody, like, sometimes your eyes get so tired and fixed and you're kind of like wonky and you need a break, and making sure that we have those opportunities during Zoom meetings, or we make sure that it's really okay for us to do that. Other thing I think about Zoom has this real option is to suppose that something is happening that you see, that where somebody is being maybe not attacked, but there's some sort of gendered or racial bias in the conversation. You have an opportunity with Zoom to actually chat with that person privately and just give them a little nudge and say, hey, I'm just wondering if maybe that's comfortable for people, because I know we don't want to be in meetings calling each other out, but this is kind of a nice little way for us to kind of rethink maybe how we do some stuff. So those are some thoughts I have about how we think about our work differently, and just kind of just rearrange a little bit and maybe build towards some of the larger cultural shifts we hope to make.
And I personally like to do a lot of stuff on phone calls so I can go sit outside.
Yeah.
Because being outside, one of the things that I tell people in my office, and some of this is hard, is like, if you're feeling depressed, I mean, one of the few things to do, one is get exercise. One is go outside, because nature is very grounding, and we need our vitamin D. And the other thing, and this is really hard right now, is like, get out of your four walls, because people, when they stay in their home, stay in their office, their own thoughts kind of collapse on them and spiral down. So I always try to get people to get out of their house, which is a little bit of a challenge right now. I'm wondering about the other thing. So some of the stuff that we've seen is about kind of some of the media and maybe limiting some of the exposure in terms of like managing depression and anxiety.
Oh yeah. A lot of the people I know just don't watch the news. Like you consume it through reading, because then you can choose what you want to dive into. But when you're watching, like, the media bias towards negativity and drama has been documented in multiple studies. And sometimes you almost have to make this choice between being a little bit more ignorant versus protecting your mental health. But I think with all of the information that's already coming at us via the emails we get, there's so many places that offer daily digests of the top 10 things you need to know today. Being conscious of how you craft your media consumption, and that includes social media. Like, if you're feeling yucky, I think taking a break from social media is an incredibly powerful sort of intervention or strategy you can take for yourself, because if you have your good people list, you can still use your phone calls, your Zoom calls, you can stay connected, but without being bombarded with all this information, either about what you're doing wrong or about all these amazing vacations other people think they're going on, or, the comparison, you'll be removing yourself from that, and that protects you as well.
So a lot of people talk about like spiritual practices, mindfulness practices. What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, I'm all for it, Nancy. I'm like, I don't want to talk. If you want to
go, because you're the positive psychologist.
I think, any of this stuff, when we talk about what's going on right now, you can't ask for what you need until you know what you need. And so in order to figure that out, you have to take a moment and just reflect. And one of my favorite tools is like an adept. I don't know if you've heard of this book called The Artist's Way, but it's this idea of the morning pages, 3 handwritten pages in a notebook. And it doesn't have to be like die hard first thing in the morning, 5 in the morning, but when you feel yourself spiraling, to grab this designated notebook and brain dump everything that's going on in your brain in 3 handwritten pages, even if it's, I don't know what's going on, I don't know what's going on, but to let your unconscious mind just sort of release itself and get rid of all these concerns that you have, then you see it on paper and you can reflect, is this something I can do something about? Do I want to just burn this because it was a great venting job? But to, sometimes you don't want to share everything with somebody else. Sometimes you just need to get it out and reflect. And so writing it down is a great, simple, cheap way to do that. And it takes maybe 15 minutes, if depending on how fast, how much you write. But then you can figure out what it is you need. And then, for example, for people who do have partners or you who want to figure out what help they need, you'll better be able to say, I really realized that I go crazy if I don't exercise, and I haven't been able to for 2 weeks now. If I were to be able to exercise, this would provide me with mental stability, and I'd better be able to do this, this, and this. And then people are more willing to help if you know what it's going to provide for you. So it's sort of this loop, and it's all connected, but this idea of taking time out, getting the thoughts out of your brain, so you're not just analyzing it in your own brain, but in writing, or at least talking it out with someone, and then coming back to it, I think is really, really powerful.
It seems to me that we are living in a time of such great uncertainty. We don't know what's what and what's going to be. We don't know whether the kids are good or the schools are going to reopen, or exactly how they're going to reopen, or what it's going to really mean, or whether we're going to go back to our workplaces. There's so much we don't know. And so if you get stuck in, am I doing it right? You're going to be in trouble, because there isn't, and we don't know what right is. I had somebody tell me the other day that I don't think I'm fit for this job. I said, well, we don't even know what this is. So how can you possibly be fit? And if you're constantly measuring yourself against some standard of perfection that never was there in the first place, it strikes me that you're going to always fall short. And you just have to kind of rid yourself of that. And that's where I find the mindfulness stuff really helpful to me, that says, this is a moment. Let's see where we are right now and make sense of it. I don't know, for whatever reason, it reminded me of something else that you said, Sarah, that's really, really important. I want to just go back to that. We need to remember that doing things with our kids now is really different. Everything needs to be scheduled in ways it wasn't before. And I'm really struck by what you said about having to be near the phone when the schedule for the pool opens up. And you have to be ready to get on the internet or make those phone calls and do it perfectly. Otherwise you lose. I mean, it's a stressor. Beyond belief.
Yeah.
So Nancy, I'm just going to take this opportunity to promote here.
Didn't get there fast.
Our next webinar next Wednesday, we have a fabulous woman who's going to speak to us about how to stay sane in an unpredictable world.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I wanted to add just one little thing, and then I kind of want to switch to questions. And Scott, I hope you're here, because I can't see the questions, so I'm kind of going to depend on you for that. Kind of the last thing I wanted to add is that the practice of gratitude, and I've heard this a lot lately from the people that I work with, gratitude actually changes some of your body chemistry. So when we can fit that in, and this is tough, and we all do have some things to be grateful for. So yeah, that's good too.
I think gratitude is something that you can practice with your kids. And, the power in if you are, now that everyone's working from home, if you're able to have a meal with your whole family together and ask everybody, what are you grateful for today? Like in the last 24 hours, what has happened? I mean, they've done studies like the difference between kids, you can even do it with kids who are in high school and are in a grumpy mood, but over time, when you ask that question repeatedly, people, when they know that the question is going to be asked for them, they will farm their whole day looking for the answer for what they're knowing is going to be asked of them at that dinner table, for example. So creating rituals around gratitude, it doesn't have, to your point, Nancy, it doesn't have to be this crazy scheduled perfection. You don't have to beat yourself up because you didn't do it one dinner, but incorporating that as a practice, as your family's thing that you talk about every day. Also, what are you most proud of yourself for today, are really powerful questions you can ask of yourself and of your kids to start building up that self-confidence and grace and ability, like recognition that you can make, we're going to all make it through this. It's just a question of how. So if we want to make it through with more grace and resilience, it's okay to start incorporating those practices. I love gratitude. That's a great point.
So we have a question this is for Sarah. Oh, and I lost it. I really love the idea of your good people list. Aside from
sharing, I got it. Aside from sharing this webinar, what are the best ways that I can help support my colleagues, friends, and families who are mothers right now and might be in need of those good people? That's a great question. I mean, I think everybody, again, there's no perfect way to do this. There's no one right way to do this. I've seen people some people have friends from all over the world, but if they're out of sight, out of mind in a different time zone, you don't talk to them for 6 months to a year, but they are people that you can confide in for everybody. So I think even just saying, you can put together a good people list based on your private, like personal support stuff. But, if you want to support other people, just saying, sometimes it's not as helpful to be like, I'm here for you if you need me. It's like people who go through grief and be like, call me if you need anything. And you're like, I can't keep track of those lists. But if you can offer specific, like, I'm here. How about let's get on a phone call? Like you said, Terry, like in the backyard, just catching up as friends. I'm here. And like, let's see what's going on. Catching up for personal conversations is really powerful, I think, and saying I'm here.
So there are other things that I've been thinking about for my friends who have children, and my kids are grown, so I do this for my kids. That being specific about how you can provide support is really great. So, for example, my list includes, I can read to your kids at night for a half hour, if that would be helpful, right? Or I can play a board game online with your kids for a half hour, if that would be helpful. It's very specific. Or I can help organize an XYZ event for you, if that would be helpful. So I think the more you can offer something concrete, as you said, the better. I think we can do that for each other. And I think, so maybe it's on all of us to make our I'm a good person and why list. Here are the things I can do.
So what about, I hate to use the word use, but teaching, utilizing your older children, your college children who are at home? What about, what can they do to help?
That's a tough age range, isn't it? And those kids are hurting. This is like in terms of childhood development and the things that they're missing out on that are very normal things. That's a great question. And I don't know if I have an answer for that right now, except again, purpose. Is there a way, even if it's getting kids to understand like hooking them into the purpose, kids can make a difference at whatever age. You don't have to tell high schoolers that one day they'll be a great so-and-so. Like they can be at great so-and-so right now, whatever they believe in. And so seeing them, having real conversations with them, making space, accepting that they're frustrated, and then helping them figure out what their strengths are and what they can do to contribute might be helpful. But my heart goes out to the kids and the parents of kids that age right now.
Imagine being a teenager.
Because I don't know. I think it's the hardest thing. And I'm not sure, again, I'm just talking I'm just talking, but I'm not sure that, asking a child who already feels bound by their home to get deeper into that space by taking care of other kids in the home is actually all that helpful. I think it just, kind of pounds it on. So I don't know. I would be careful about that. I think these kids are struggling because they're in the four walls of their home and they're not out with their kids and where they should be developmentally.
Yeah.
Imagine being a teenager stuck at home with your parents for months on end.
And then you're told to take care of your younger kid, your younger sibling. I mean, it just.
Yeah, I think that's where understanding that kids at that age need the external and need to connect to that greater outside helps. I mean, there's organizations in town. The Colorado Youth Congress is been around for a few years. They help connect to social justice causes, help motivate children to make change. And I say children, but these are teenagers who are already fully capable of writing, making change, protesting, participating. And so understanding that you don't want to quash their voices and say, no, you're too young for this. Like of all times, they need to be heard and probably be connected with some of the greater issues. I think when we talk about the bigger, I mean, there's a lot, aside from COVID, there's also a lot of societal stuff going on right now. And you don't want to scare young children. You don't want to feel like their lives are threatened. But I think when they're older, they're able to understand that there are structures in place, that there's things going on. And so, maybe educating yourself onto some of that and involving them in some of those conversations is not a bad thing to do either.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree.
So that's all. Those are the questions. My thought is to go ahead and wrap up unless one of you has, actually, let's do this. Let's have like one pearl of wisdom. And then we're going to kind of wrap up and let people know that this is going to be on YouTube. It's actually recording live on YouTube and Facebook right now. And then I think we're going to post it on our website. So yeah, last pearls of wisdom.
I'm not sure it's a pearl, and maybe it's not even wise, but I want to just go back to the idea that it's helpful for me to say, in this moment, let's not forget there were things that were happening before that were challenging for us, and let's look at those. And it may be the opportunity for us to reimagine work differently. But in order for us to do that, I think we have to account for the fact that here have been the challenges in the past. How does this new normal, how can we work this new normal so that those challenges are not amplified or exacerbated, but rather, in fact, they're dealt with? And so I think that it's a moment for all of us. And I think it's pivotal, and maybe we can shift. And so I guess my pearl of wisdom is really a suggestion that it's an opportunity for us to rethink some of our, basic practices to see if we can do them differently in a way that builds a more equitable world rather than create more and more inequity.
That's
I love
great.
that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I would say you're not alone. And don't listen to the lies that tell you that you're alone. You're absolutely worth the effort it takes to make this new normal work for you. So don't give up the fight, because we're all in it together.
So my last pearl is, and when I work with my entrepreneurs and I try to talk to them about this, they look at me like I'm speaking Chinese. It is really important to go outside and play. Play is good for resilience. It's good for problem solving. It's good for lots of things. So yeah, that would be my pitch, to go outside and play.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And my brain tells me when my kids are still in elementary school and they're like, come out and play. And I'm like, I have so many things to do. I have so many other things, but every time I listen to them go play, it feels so much better. So I think that it's spot on.
Yep. And kids make you be present.
For sure.
You do.
Well, thank you. We as a community really appreciate what you have to offer. Thank you for being here. So next week is Being Sane in an Unpredictable World. This is on YouTube, and thanks, Scott, for managing all the technology for us. I appreciate it. I think that's it.
Thanks, Terry, for doing all of this work, and Scott as well. This is awesome that you're looking out for the mental health of people, small business owners here in Colorado. That's awesome.
Great. And I appreciate the fact that you're willing to bring in some of the bigger structural issues that are affecting mental health, because I think we really need to account for them and change some of them.
Yep. Everybody have a most fabulous day. Go out and play.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.